Chapter 1. The Weight of a Broken Dream. Elliot Grayson stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, the Seattle skyline sprawling beneath him like a glittering tapestry. At 42, he was a man who had conquered the world of tech. His company's AI-driven healthcare solutions saving countless lives. Forbes had dubbed him the empathetic innovator, a title that felt like a cruel irony now. His wealth could buy private islands, but it couldn't buy the one thing he'd always wanted, a family. The diagnosis of infertility, delivered in a sterile doctor's office a decade ago, had shattered that dream, and with it, his engagement to Leila Monroe, the woman he thought he'd grow old with. The invitation lay on the mahogany desk behind him, its cream cardstock embossed with gold lettering. Leila Monroe and Dr. Nathan Caldwell cordially invite you to their wedding. It had arrived 3 weeks ago, and Elliot hadn't touched it since opening it. He didn't need to. The date June 12th was seared into his mind. Leila was getting married tomorrow, and she wanted him there. Why? To prove she'd moved on. To twist the knife. Or, as the handwritten note tucked inside suggested, because she still cared about him as a friend. Elliot turned from the window, his reflection catching in the glass a tall man with salt and pepper hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that carried too much sorrow. He crossed the room, his bare feet silent on the hardwood, and picked up the invitation. The note fell out, fluttering to the floor. He knelt to retrieve it, his fingers brushing the familiar curve of Leila's handwriting. Elliot, I know this might be hard, but I'd love for you to be there. You were such a big part of my life. I hope you're happy. Leila. Happy. The word stung. He wasn't unhappy, not in the way people might assume. His life was full board meetings, charity galas, late-night coding sessions, but it was hollow, too, like a house with no laughter. He'd always imagined children running through these halls, their voices echoing off the walls. Leila had wanted that, too. When the doctor confirmed Elliot's condition, they tried to hold on. They explored adoption, surrogacy, every option, but the strain grew, and Leila's patience wore thin. She wanted a biological child, she admitted one tearful night. She wanted to carry her own. Elliot couldn't give her that, so she left. He set the invitation down and sank into the leather armchair by the fireplace. The penthouse was too quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that amplified every thought. He could decline the invitation, send a polite gift, and move on, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of Leila's smile, or the way she'd believed in him when he was just a broke coder with big dreams. Maybe it was the faint hope that seeing her happy would close this chapter of his heart. A notification pinged on his phone, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his assistant, Clara. Reminder: you're scheduled to visit the Hope Haven shelter at 9 a.m. tomorrow. They're expecting you for the donation handover. Elliot sighed. He'd almost forgotten. Hope Haven was one of the many charities he supported, a shelter for homeless youth in downtown Seattle. He'd promised to deliver a check and spend some time with the kids. The timing wasn't ideal, but maybe it was what he needed. A distraction from the wedding. Sleep eluded him that night. By 8:30 a.m., he was in the back of his sleek black SUV, driven by his longtime chauffeur, Marcus. The city blurred past, a mix of gray clouds and neon signs. Elliot adjusted his tie, a navy silk one Leila had picked out years ago. He hadn't worn it in ages, but today it felt right. Like armor. Hope Haven was a modest brick building, wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and bleach, and the walls were covered with children's drawings. The director, a warm woman named Ms. Rivera, greeted him with a handshake. Mr. Grayson, we can't thank you enough. Your donation will keep our programs running for another year. It's my pleasure, Elliot said, his voice steady but distant. He handed her the check, and the small crowd of staff and volunteers clapped. Then Ms. Rivera gestured to a group of kids gathered in the common room. Would you like to meet some of our residents? They've been excited to see you. Elliot nodded, though his mind was already drifting to the wedding. He followed her into the room, where a dozen kids, ranging from 8 to 16, sat on mismatched couches. Most looked wary, their eyes guarded, but two caught his attention. Immediately a boy and a girl, sitting close together, like they were guarding each other. This is Jamal, Ms. Rivera said, pointing to the boy, who looked about 12. He had a faded Seahawks cap, pulled low over his eyes and a scowl that seemed permanent. And this is Sophie, his sister. The girl, maybe 10, had a tangle of braids and a threadbare sweater that was too big for her. She clutched a worn sketchbook, her fingers smudged with pencil lead. Hi, Elliot said, crouching to their level. I'm Elliot. Nice to meet you. Jamal didn't look up. Sophie gave a small nod, Her eyes flickering with curiosity, Ms. Rivera lowered her voice. They've been with us for 6 months. Their mom passed away, and their dad, well, he's not in the picture. They're good kids, but they've been through a lot. Elliot's chest tightened. He knew that look in their eyes, loss, the kind that left you untethered. What's in the sketchbook? He asked Sophie, hoping to break the ice. She hesitated, then opened it to a drawing of a house with a garden, vibrant even in pencil. It's where I want to live someday, she said softly, with Jamal. And a dog. It's beautiful, Elliot said, meaning it. He glanced at Jamal, who was still staring at the floor. You into art, too? Nah, Jamal muttered. I'm into not being here. Elliot chuckled, surprising himself. Nah, Jamal muttered. I'm into not being here. Elliot chuckled, surprising himself. Fair enough. What do you like to do? Jamal shrugged, but Sophie piped up. He likes basketball. He's really good. Is that right? Elliot said. I used to play in college. Maybe we could shoot some hoops sometime. Jamal finally looked up, skeptical. You don't look like you play. Looks can be deceiving, Elliot said with a grin. Bet I could take you. For the first time, Jamal's skull softened. Just a fraction. Ms. Rivera smiled and moved on to introduce other kids. But Elliot lingered with Jamal and Sophie. He asked about their favorite foods, pizza for Jamal, tacos for Sophie, their favorite movies. Sophie loved The Lion King. Jamal claimed he didn't watch movies, though Sophie rolled her eyes at that. The conversation was light, but Elliot felt a connection he hadn't expected. These kids, with their guarded hearts and quiet dreams, reminded him of himself at their age, alone, unsure, but stubbornly hopeful. As he prepared to leave, Sophie tugged at his sleeve. Are you coming back? She asked, her voice small but urgent. Elliot paused. He wasn't one to make promises he couldn't keep. I'll try, he said. Maybe we can get that basketball game going. She nodded, clutching her sketchbook tighter. Jamal didn't say anything, but his eyes followed Elliot as he walked out, back in the SUV. Elliot leaned his head against the window. The visit had stirred something in him, a mix of warmth and ache. He thought of Sophie's drawing, Jamal's guarded defiance. They deserved more than a shelter, more than a check. But what could he do? He wasn't their father. Wasn't anyone's father. Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror. You okay, boss? You seem heavy. Elliot managed a half smile. Just thinking. I've got that wedding tomorrow. Marcus whistled. Leela's wedding. You're really going? I don't know, Elliot admitted. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to stay a million miles away. Marcus nodded, his voice gentle. You'll figure it out. You always do. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep again. He paced the penthouse, the invitation taunting him from the desk. Around midnight, he made a decision. He'd go to the wedding. Not for Leela. Not for closure, but for himself. He needed to face this, to let go of the past. But as he packed a suit for the trip, another thought struck him. Jamal and Sophie. They'd been on his mind all day, their faces etched in his memory. He pictured them at the shelter, alone in a crowd. And then, an idea, a crazy, impulsive idea took root. What if he brought them with him, not just to the wedding, but to show them a world beyond the shelter, even for a day? A world with fancy hotels, good food, maybe a basketball court. It was absurd, logistically complicated, but it felt right. Nah, Jamal muttered. I'm into not being here. Elliot chuckled, surprising himself. Fair enough. What do you like to do? Jamal shrugged, but Sophie piped up. He likes basketball. He's really good. Is that right? Elliot said. I used to play in college. Maybe we could shoot some hoops sometime. Jamal finally looked up, skeptical. You don't look like you play. Looks can be deceiving, Elliot said with a grin. Bet I could take you. For the first time, Jamal's skull softened. Just a fraction. Ms. Rivera smiled and moved on to introduce other kids. But Elliot lingered with Jamal and Sophie. He asked about their favorite foods, pizza for Jamal, tacos for Sophie, their favorite movies. Sophie loved The Lion King. Jamal claimed he didn't watch movies, though Sophie rolled her eyes at that. The conversation was light, but Elliot felt a connection he hadn't expected. These kids, with their guarded hearts and quiet dreams, reminded him of himself at their age, alone, unsure, but stubbornly hopeful. As he prepared to leave, Sophie tugged at his sleeve. Are you coming back? She asked, her voice small but urgent. Elliot paused. He wasn't one to make promises he couldn't keep. I'll try, he said. Maybe we can get that basketball game going. She nodded, clutching her sketchbook tighter. Jamal didn't say anything, but his eyes followed Elliot as he walked out, back in the SUV. Elliot leaned his head against the window. The visit had stirred something in him, a mix of warmth and ache. He thought of Sophie's drawing, Jamal's guarded defiance. They deserved more than a shelter, more than a check. But what could he do? He wasn't their father. Wasn't anyone's father. Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror. You okay, boss? You seem heavy. Elliot managed a half smile. Just thinking. I've got that wedding tomorrow. Marcus whistled. Leela's wedding. You're really going? I don't know, Elliot admitted. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to stay a million miles away. Marcus nodded, his voice gentle. You'll figure it out. You always do. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep again. He paced the penthouse, the invitation taunting him from the desk. Around midnight, he made a decision. He'd go to the wedding. Not for Leela. Not for closure, but for himself. He needed to face this, to let go of the past. But as he packed a suit for the trip, another thought struck him. Jamal and Sophie. They'd been on his mind all day, their faces etched in his memory. He pictured them at the shelter, alone in a crowd. And then, an idea, a crazy, impulsive idea took root. What if he brought them with him, not just to the wedding, but to show them a world beyond the shelter, even for a day? A world with fancy hotels, good food, maybe a basketball court. It was absurd, logistically complicated, but it felt right. He called Ms. Rivera at 7 a.m., catching her before the shelter opened. I want to take Jamal and Sophie on a trip, he said. Just for the weekend. I'm going to a wedding in Portland, and I thought, maybe they'd like to come. There was a long pause. Mr. Grayson, that's incredibly kind, but there are protocols. Background checks, permissions. I'll cover everything, Elliot said. I'll have my team handle the paperwork. I want to give them something special. Ms. Rivera hesitated, then softened. Let me talk to them. If they're comfortable, and we can sort out the logistics, maybe we can make it work. By noon, it was settled. Jamal and Sophie had agreed, though Jamal was predictably skeptical. Elliot's team worked miracles, securing temporary guardianship forms and travel arrangements. He booked a suite at the Portland hotel, ensuring the kids had their own space. He even called ahead to arrange a basketball court rental. As the SUV pulled up to Hope Haven that afternoon, Elliot's heart raced. Jamal and Sophie stepped out, each carrying a small backpack. Sophie's eyes were wide, Jamal's narrowed. This for real? Jamal asked. For real, Elliot said. You ready for a road trip? Sophie grinned, clutching her sketchbook. Jamal shrugged, but there was a spark in his eyes. For the first time in years, Elliot felt something like hope. Chapter 2. The road to Portland. The hum of the SUV's engine was a steady backdrop as the Seattle skyline faded in the rearview mirror. Elliot sat in the back with Jamal and Sophie, the leather seats creaking softly as the kids shifted. Sophie clutched her sketchbook, her eyes darting between the window and Elliot, while Jamal slouched, his Seahawks cap tilted low, earbuds dangling from his neck. The 3-hour drive to Portland felt like uncharted territory, not just geographically, but emotionally. Elliot wasn't sure what he was doing, bringing two kids he'd just met to his ex-fiancee's wedding. But as he glanced at Sophie's curious expression and Jamal's guarded one, he knew he couldn't have left them behind. Ever been to Portland? Elliot asked, breaking the silence. Sophie shook her head. Never been anywhere but Seattle. Mama used to say we'd go on a big trip someday, but her voice trailed off, and she hugged her sketchbook tighter. Jamal snorted, not looking up. Yeah, well, someday never happened. Elliot's chest ached at the bitterness in Jamal's tone. He recognized it, the armor of someone who'd been let down too many times. Well, you're going now, he said lightly. Portland's got good food, cool bridges, and I booked us a court for tomorrow morning. You still think you can take me in basketball? Jamal's lips twitched, almost a smile. You're gonna regret that, man. Sophie giggled, the sound bright in the quiet car. Jamal's really good, Mr. Elliot. He used to play at the park every day. Just Elliot, he corrected gently. And we'll see about that, Jamal. I've got a few moves left. The banter eased the tension, and Sophie started chattering about her favorite scenes from The Lion King, her enthusiasm infectious. Jamal rolled his eyes but didn't interrupt, and Elliot found himself laughing for the first time in days. He'd expected the drive to be heavy, weighed down by thoughts of Leela's wedding, but the kids were a tether, grounding him in the present. An hour into the trip, Marcus pulled into a roadside diner, its neon sign proclaiming best burgers in Washington. Elliot had suggested the stop, remembering how Sophie mentioned loving tacos and Jamal craving pizza. The diner's menu promised both. Inside, the air smelled of grease and coffee, and a jukebox played an old Springsteen song. They slid into a red vinyl booth, the kids' eyes wide as they scanned the laminated menus. Order whatever you want, Elliot said. No limits. Sophie's jaw dropped. Really? Even dessert? Especially dessert, Elliot said with a grin. Jamal eyed him suspiciously. Why you being so nice? You don't even know us. The question caught Elliot off guard. He leaned back, choosing his words carefully. I don't know. Maybe because I see something in you too. You're tough, both of you. You've been through stuff I can't imagine. And you're still here, looking out for each other. It's something special. Sophie beamed, but Jamal's expression didn't soften. People don't just do stuff for free, he muttered. What's in it for you? Elliot met his gaze. Honestly, you're helping me out, too. I've got this thing tomorrow, a wedding. It's kind of a big deal for me, and I wasn't sure I could face it alone. Having you two along, it makes it easier. Jamal studied him, then shrugged, turning back to the menu. Whatever, I'm getting a double cheeseburger. The meal was a small victory. Sophie devoured her tacos, sauce smearing her chin, while Jamal inhaled his burger and stole fries from Sophie's plate. Elliot ordered a milkshake for the table, and when Sophie insisted they all try it with one straw each, he laughed and played along, ignoring the curious stares from other patrons. For a moment, they weren't a millionaire and to homeless kids. There were just three people sharing a milkshake, trading stories about bad school lunches and favorite superheroes. Back on the road, Sophie dozed off, her head resting on her sketchbook. Jamal stared out the window, his earbuds in, but Elliot noticed he wasn't playing music, just holding them like a shield. You okay? Elliot asked quietly. Jamal hesitated, then pulled out one earbud. Why is this wedding such a big deal? You said it's hard for you. Elliot's grip tightened on the armrest. He hadn't planned to share this, but Jamal's directness deserved honesty. The bride, Leela, she was my fiancée a long time ago. We were supposed to get married, have a family, but it didn't work out. Jamal frowned. She dumped you. Elliot chuckled, the sound bittersweet. Something like that. I couldn't give her what she wanted, kids, a certain kind of life, so she moved on. She's marrying someone else now. That sucks, Jamal said bluntly. You still love her? The question hit like a punch. Did he? He'd asked himself that 1,000 times since the invitation arrived. I love who we were, he said finally, but I don't know if I love her now. I need to see her happy, I think. To let go. Jamal nodded slowly, like he understood more than a 12-year-old should. Me and Sophie, we got nobody now. Just each other. Sometimes I think if I let go of being mad about it, I'll lose her, too. Elliot's throat tightened. You won't lose her, Jamal. She's right there, and she looks up to you. You're her hero. Jamal glanced at his sleeping sister, his expression softening. Yeah, well, she's a pain sometimes. Elliot smiled. That's family. They reached Portland just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Willamette River in hues of orange and pink. The hotel was a sleek, modern tower, its lobby all glass and marble. Sophie woke as they pulled up, gasping at the sight. It's like a castle, she said, scrambling out of the car. Jamal was less impressed, eyeing the uniformed bellhops with suspicion. This place is bougie, he muttered. Bougie's not so bad for a weekend. Elliot said, tossing him a room key. You've got your own space in the suite. Basketball courts booked for 8 a.m. The suite was on the top floor, with views of the city skyline and a living area bigger than the shelter's common room. Sophie ran to the window, pressing her hands against the glass. It's so pretty. Jamal, look. Jamal shrugged but joined her, his tough facade cracking just a bit. Elliot watched them, a warmth spreading in his chest. He'd made the right call bringing them here. Whatever happened at the wedding, this moment their wide eyes, their tentative trust was worth it. Dinner was room service. A feast of pizza, tacos, and chocolate cake. Sophie sketched while they ate, showing Elliot a new drawing of the hotel, complete with a tiny stick figure version of him holding a basketball. Jamal smirked and added a speech bubble. Elliot loses big time. They laughed, and Elliot felt a pang of something he hadn't in years. Belonging. Later, as the kids settled into their rooms, Elliot stood on the suite's balcony, the city lights twinkling below. The wedding was tomorrow afternoon, and his stomach churned at the thought. He'd face Leela, her new life, her new love. Would it hurt? Would it heal? He didn't know, but he wasn't alone this time. Jamal and Sophie were with him, and that changed everything. The next morning, Elliot woke early, pulling on sneakers and a t-shirt for the basketball game. The hotel's indoor court was state-of-the-art, with polished wood and crisp nets. Jamal arrived in borrowed athletic gear, Sophie trailing behind with her sketchbook. 1-on-1, Jamal said, bouncing the ball. First to 10. You're on, Elliot said, stretching. He hadn't played in years, but the muscle memory kicked in. Jamal was quick, his moves sharp from streetball, but Elliot held his own, sinking a jumper that made Sophie cheer. The game was close, tied at 8-8. when Jamal drove for a layup. Elliot blocked him, stealing the ball and scoring. Foul, Jamal protested, but he was grinning. No refs. No fouls, Elliot teased, tossing him the ball. They played to 10, Jamal winning with a slick crossover. Sophie clapped wildly, sketching the final shot. You're not bad for an old guy, Jamal said, breathing hard. And you're not bad for a kid. Elliot shot back. They high-fived, and Elliot felt lighter than he had in months. Back in the suite, they showered and dressed for the wedding. Elliot had arranged for outfits, Sophie in a pale blue dress that made her twirl, Jamal in a tailored blazer and jeans, since he refused a suit. Elliot wore a charcoal suit, the navy tie Leela had given him years ago, a quiet nod to their past. As they headed to the venue, Sophie slipped her hand into his. Thanks for bringing us, Elliot, she said. This is the best day ever. Jamal didn't say anything, but he walked closer, his shoulder brushing Elliot's. The gesture said enough. The garden was a vision of white roses and fairy lights, the air scented with jasmine. Guests milled about, their laughter floating over the string quartet. Elliot's heart raced as they approached the seating area. He scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Leela, but she was likely with the bridal party. A woman in a floral dress greeted them, checking the guest list. Mr. Grayson, party of 3, she asked, raising an eyebrow at the kids. That's us, Elliot said, his voice steady. She led them to seats near the back, and Sophie whispered, it's like a movie. Jamal just nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was sizing up a new neighborhood. As the music swelled, signaling the ceremony's start, Elliot took a deep breath. This was at the moment he'd been dreading and needing. He glanced at Jamal and Sophie, their presence a quiet strength. Whatever happened next, he wasn't facing it alone. Chapter 3. The Garden of New Beginning. Garden estate glowed under the late afternoon sun, its white roses and fairy lights creating a scene that felt both magical and surreal. Elliot sat between Jamal and Sophie in the back row of the wedding ceremony, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The string quartet's melody softened, and the crowd hushed as the processional began. Sophie leaned forward, her blue dress rustling, her eyes wide with wonder. Jamal slouched, but his gaze flicked toward the aisle, curious despite himself. Elliot's heart pounded. This was Leela's moment, her new chapter. And here he was, a guest in her story, with 2 unexpected companions who had already changed his thought. The bridesmaids glided down the aisle in pale lavender gowns, their smiles practiced but warm. Then came Leela. She appeared like a vision, her white dress flowing, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. She looked radiant, happy, her arm linked with her father's. Elliot's breath caught. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but not like this, not with her marrying someone else. Yet, seeing her now, he felt a strange mix of pain and relief. She was where she was meant to be. Sophie whispered, she's so pretty. And Elliot managed a nod. Jamal glanced at him, his expression unreadable but softer than usual. The kid's presence anchored him, a reminder that this day wasn't just about letting go. It was about moving forward. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Dr. Nathan Caldwell, the groom, was a handsome man with kind eyes and a steady demeanor. When he and Leela exchanged vows, their voices carried a quiet certainty that made Elliot's chest ache. He remembered their own promises, whispered in a Seattle park years ago, and how they'd unraveled under the weight of his infertility. But as Leela said, I do, and Nathan kissed her, Elliot didn't feel the bitterness he'd feared. Instead, he felt a quiet acceptance. She was happy. That was enough. After the ceremony, guests mingled on the lawn, sipping champagne and nibbling hors d'oeuvres. Sophie tugged at Elliot's sleeve. Can we get some of those tiny sandwiches? They look fancy. Elliot chuckled. Go for it. Grab some for Jamal, too. Jamal rolled his eyes but followed Sophie to the buffet, his blazer slightly askew. Elliot watched them, marveling at how quickly they'd carved a space in his heart. He was about to join them when a familiar voice stopped him. Elliot. He turned, and there was Leela, her wedding dress shimmering in the fading light. She looked older, but not in a weary way. Her eyes held a warmth that hadn't dimmed. You came, she said, her smile tentative but genuine. I did, Elliot said, his voice steadier than he felt. You look incredible, Leela. Congratulations. She blushed, glancing toward Nathan, who was chatting with guests nearby. Thank you. I wasn't sure you'd come. I know it's complicated. Elliot shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. It's not so complicated anymore. I'm happy for you, really. Leela's eyes softened, and she touched his arm. I'm glad you're here. You were such a big part of my life, Elliot. I'll always care about you. The words stung, but they also soothed. Same here, he said. I brought some friends, actually. He nodded toward Jamal and Sophie, who were balancing plates of food. Sophie giggling as Jamal tried to sneak in extra dessert. Leela followed his gaze, her expression curious. Who are they? Kids from a shelter I support, Elliot said. Jamal and Sophie. They're siblings. I thought they deserved a day out, something special. Leela's smile widened. That's so you, Elliot. Always looking out for others. They look happy with you. He glanced at the kids, warmth spreading through him. They're good kids. They've been through a lot, but they're tough. Like family. Leela's eyes glistened, and she squeezed his hand. You're going to be okay, Elliot. You've got a big heart. Don't let it stay empty. Before he could respond, Nathan approached, extending a hand. Elliot, right? Thanks for coming. Leela's told me a lot about you. Elliot shook his hand, noting the sincerity in Nathan's voice. All good things, I hope, he said lightly. Mostly. Nathan teased, and they all laughed, the tension easing. Leela excused herself to greet other guests, and Nathan lingered a moment. She worried about you, you know. Said you deserved to find your happiness, too. Elliot nodded, his throat tight. I'm working on it. As Nathan rejoined Leela, Elliot returned to Jamal and Sophie, who were now sitting on a stone bench. Sophie sketching the garden while Jamal munched on a mini quiche. This stuff's weird, Jamal said, holding up the quiche. But not bad. Elliot laughed, sitting beside them. You two holding up okay? Sophie nodded, showing him her sketch of vibrant drawing of the garden, with Leela in her dress and tiny figures of herself. Jamal and Elliot in the foreground. It's like a fairy tale, she said. Thanks for bringing us. Jamal didn't speak, but he nudged Sophie's shoulder, a silent agreement. Elliot's heart swelled. He brought them here to give them a break from their reality, but they were giving him something, to a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The reception began as the sun set, the garden transforming into a dance floor under twinkling lights. Sophie begged to dance, and Elliot obliged, twirling her to a pop song while Jamal watched, smirking. You're embarrassing, Jamal called, but he joined them when Sophie grabbed his hand, the three of them swaying awkwardly but laughing. Guests smiled at the sight, some whispering about the tech mogul with the kids. But Elliot didn't care. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. Later, as the music slowed, Elliot sat with the kids at a table, sharing a slice of wedding cake. Sophie was buzzing with excitement, recounting every detail of the day, while Jamal listened, his usual scowl replaced by a quiet contentment. Elliot leaned back, watching the dancers, and felt a shift inside him. The pain of losing Leela was still there, but it was softer now, overshadowed by something new, a sense of family, however unconventional. As the night wound down, Leela found them again, this time with a small gift bag. For you, she said, handing it to Elliot. Inside was a framed photo from their engagement, the two of them laughing in that Seattle park. A note was tucked beside it. Thank you for being part of my story. Keep writing yours, Leela. Elliot's eyes stung, but he smiled. Thank you, Leela, for everything. She hugged him, then knelt to talk to Sophie and Jamal. You to take care of Elliot. Okay. He's one of the good ones. Sophie nodded solemnly, while Jamal muttered, yeah, he's all right. Leela laughed, and with a final wave, she returned to Nathan. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, the kids dozing in the back seat. Elliot stared out the window, the photo frame in his lap. He thought about Leela's words, about his heart, about the kids beside him. When they reached the suite, Sophie woke long enough to hug him goodnight, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. Jamal lingered, hesitating at his door. Today was cool, Jamal said, almost grudgingly. Thanks. Elliot nodded. Anytime, Jamal. The next morning, they packed up, the kids quieter now, as if sensing the weight of returning to the shelter. Over breakfast, Sophie showed Elliot another drawing, a house like the one from her first sketch, but this time with three figures in the garden. Her, Jamal, and Elliot. You're in it now, she said shyly. Elliot's throat tightened. I'm honored. Back in Seattle, dropping the kids at Hope Haven was harder than he'd expected. Ms. Rivera greeted them, noting the light in Sophie's eyes and the slight ease in Jamal's posture. You did something special for them, she told Elliot. They haven't looked this happy in months. I want to do more, Elliot said, the words spilling out. I want to help them, not just with donations. Maybe foster care, adoption. I don't know the process, but I want to learn. Ms. Rivera's eyes widened, but she smiled. That's a big step, Mr. Grayson, but I can see you mean it. Let's talk soon. As he said goodbye, Sophie hugged him tightly, and Jamal offered a fist bump, his eyes meeting Elliot's with a trust that hadn't been there before. You coming back? Sophie asked, echoing our question from their first meeting. Count on it. Elliot said, and this time, he knew he meant it, back in his penthouse. The silence wasn't as heavy. The invitation was gone, replaced by Sophie's drawing, now propped on his desk. Elliot traced the figures in the garden, his heart full. He'd gone to the wedding to close a chapter, but he'd found something else, a new story, one he was ready to write with Jamal and Sophie. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. For the first time, his wealth felt like a tool, not for buying islands, but for building a home.